We'll start our conversation in the Horn of Africa, where we take a look at Kenya's terrorism, financing, and money laundering issues. Now, Kenya is developing new regulations to oversee cryptocurrency trading, citing concerns about increased transactions in virtual assets, leading to heightened risks of money laundering and terrorism financing. Now, a technical working group advising the Treasury is drafting regulations considering the possibility of a standalone regulator for virtual assets. Despite being ranked among top leaders in peer-to-peer crypto platforms by Chainalysis, China currently lacks cryptocurrency trading regulations. So the Financial Reporting Center Director General, Tito Meka, emphasized the need for regulation to prevent exploitation for illicit activities. Kenya's efforts align with the Financial Action Task Force through Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group to improve the integrity of its financial system and avoid potential grey listing. This morning, Esteban Gudici, Senior Policy Advisor at Trusted, joins me to further unpack this. Thank you so much for joining our conversation.
Good morning, Lekan. Thank you for the space, and good morning to your audience too.
Okay, so let's start this way. How does Kenya's lack of regulations for trading in cryptocurrencies contribute to concerns about money laundering and terrorism financing?
Okay, this is a difficult and very new topic. I think that we need to start saying that today we are focusing on Kenya because right now the Financial Action Task Force plenary is taking place, and there is a possibility that Kenya is going to be placed in the grey list of this international watchdog. But it's important to say that this is a problem that all the countries are grappling with, the use of cryptocurrencies. Now, why this is particularly an issue for Kenya? Well, let me give you some facts. It's important to say that Kenya has experienced a significant surge in cryptocurrency usage, with transactions near to 20 billion for the years 2021 and 2022. Also, the cryptocurrency traffic in South Africa has been the 5th in the world. I mean, it's the 5th country in the world trading with cryptocurrencies. This means that we have 4.5 million people using this platform. It's nearly 10% of Kenya's total population. I mean, this is huge. And this has a lot to do with the growth that the country is experiencing because it's fertile ground, the country, for fintech and for new technologies that they are sprouting there. And that's something very positive. But of course, it comes with lots of risks. And you ask me how this is a problem for South Africa. Well, the Financial Action Task Force, very intelligently and wisely, has produced some guidelines and has updated very recently in November 2023 their recommendations, particularly in what has to do with the use of new technologies. And there is a whole set of regulations, of standards of international level, that request countries to have a specific regulation for virtual asset service providers. And at the moment that we are talking, Kenya hasn't enacted that. But as you said, there is a working group tackling this issue because it's important to update these financial regulations for preventing Kenya being grey listed by the Financial Action Task Force, and also for mitigating the risks of money laundering and financing of terrorism. This is basically the full problematic.
So can we understand this better? Has there been a history of terrorism financing in Kenya that actually puts the country under the FATF's radar, or the possibility now stems from the fact that the country has largely employed the use of crypto for transactions?
Well, this is not entirely proven that the country or this has been the case. But it is true that there are many cases that have been showcased by the Financial Action Task Force all over the world. There is a guide that was released a couple of years ago with over 100 cases where it is evidence that cryptocurrencies have been used for different criminal activity or for layering. Layering is something that is used when it comes to money laundering to, let's say, launder the illegal origin of the proceeds. Throughout the past years, particularly in 2023, Kenya has enacted very specific laws. It has updated the regulatory framework for tackling money laundering and financing of terrorism. But of course, now we are talking today about virtual assets because it's something that hasn't been entirely tackled. Now, when it comes to figures or specific investigations that show that cryptocurrencies have been used for financing terrorism in Kenya. I don't have that data, but there is the risk because it's something that is not being regulated. But as I mentioned when I started talking, this is not a problem that only Kenya has. And if you let me go a little bit more into technical details, the Financial Action Task Force standards, they mostly tackle the problem of virtual asset service providers. This means that there is a central authority, like if it was a kind of a trading platform that has users that trade cryptocurrencies. But to me, if you ask me, there is a big problem and a very difficult problem to tackle that has to do with the peer-to-peer transactions where there is no central authority or there is no broker or a company, let's say, that can conduct the due diligence, know your customer. So these are things that are being currently discussed all over the world. And I think that this is a big challenge for all of us.
All right, so you have actually shared concerns about Kenya's trading with cryptocurrencies, but then I'd like to still find out, does it have to do with the country's geopositioning? Does it have to do with the trade interconnectedness in the country and probably high fintech use that increase its vulnerability to money laundering and terrorism financing? Because that was suggested in the report in 2021.
Yes, that's correct. That report, it's the 2021 Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing National Risk Assessment. This is a self-assessment done by the Kenyan authorities, which is based on the National Risk Assessment tool that was developed by the World Bank. And according to this 2021 report, it's true, Kenyans has a geopositioning and a trade interconnectedness and also high fintech use by many people who are, they are developing all these things in Kenya that creates a big risk because there is lots of movement, there is a lot of trade there. There is let's say, a sparkling economy in that sense. But this has severely amplified its exposure to these risks, particularly because the banking industry, the traditional banking industry, has been exposed to some vulnerabilities in terms of money laundering. But what happens with all this, with the new technologies? Well, there is another fact that it's very interesting that relates to the use of decentralized economies. The use of cryptocurrencies by many African people and doing this directly with the mobile phones. This is like the platforms on mobile phones in Kenya has grown amazingly. And this clearly creates a risk because you don't have a central authority, you don't have a bank. It's something that is being done, let's say, even spontaneously by people who do not necessarily have the knowledge, the technical knowledge, but because these platforms, they have been developed in a way that they are very user-friendly, there is a lot of transactions that are being done like this. And this is why we are putting the eye on this problematic. And this is a self-assessment of the Kenyan government that realizes about these challenges. Though, on one hand, there is a huge potential and it's bringing investment and it's making the economy growth. At the same time, it creates these risks. And that's why we are discussing this now.
So let's now look at the standalone virtual asset regulator being proposed by the technical working group. Now, what are the expected roles it should play in tracking and nipping illicit financial activities in the country?
Yes, this is being championed by the director of the Financial Reporting Center. They understand that there is this problem and they are currently working with a working group. They have even commissioned a study to a blockchain association in Kenya. And particularly what I have seen, what I'm aware of, is that they are drafting new regulations in terms of having a standalone regulation that is going to be cross-sectoral, meaning that it's going to help for all kind of issues that the country can be grappling with that are related to the use of cryptocurrencies. It's interesting. I've been talking with some people, and it's interesting that there are going to be specific regulations for everything that has to do with the initial coin offerings. This is when a new coin is being released, how this is going to be done, how it's going to be monitored. And this is something that over the past years, there was no control whatsoever. So it's something that it's amazing that Kenya is getting into this. And they are also developing the laws, of course, in relation to digital asset exchanges, which the Financial Action Task Force nominates them as the virtual asset service providers. This is one of the biggest requirements of the Financial Action Task Force. There are also being some policy developments in the sense that they are taking into consideration the whole situation and trying to see in which direction Kenya is going to go, in the sense that if they are going to make it difficult to use cryptocurrencies, or in a certain way using them in a positive way. And I think that this is the right way to go. And this working group, it's also focusing on other legislative initiatives. And well, I already mentioned the Blockchain Association of Kenya is being involved. And also they are engaging central banks because the central bank, because, well, the bank needs to be involved in these kind of things. And as you may know, there are some banks that they are starting to work also with cryptocurrencies. So those are basically the measures that I'm aware of that Mr. Micah has proposed.
Well, despite what it is meant to achieve, some investors and users feel concerned about the possibility of monitoring and controlling the cryptocurrency world in Kenya. Why is that? Chainalysis ranked Kenya among top leaders, or dealers rather, in peer-to-peer crypto platforms. So some people feel that won't these regulations sort of instead stifle an already burgeoning crypto space in the country?
Well, that's a very good question, Lekan. I'm going to give you my personal opinion on this. What I think is going to happen. I mean, when it comes to peer-to-peer transactions, I really don't see how this can be very regulated. I mean, this has a lot to do with adoption. How many people are going to be involved in the crypto world? This is something that has been discussed over the past 10 years. I'm sure that you're aware that right now we have a bull market with Bitcoin, or it appears that it's starting again, meaning that more people might come to use these kind of assets. And the problem with the peer-to-peer, the problem, or also it can be seen as an advantage. I'm not going to say it because, to my understanding, one needs to take a kind of political position to say if he's against or for. Well, but the situation that we had here is that this cannot be easily monitored. I mean, if I have a crypto wallet that I have open, that it's not necessarily attached to my name, I mean, there are ways to trace that. There are investigations. For instance, just to make a parenthesis, there was this cyber attack in a company in the US. They asked for ransomware. The ransom was paid, and the FBI managed to track down, because if this is done, it can be done. But this, at the time being, requires lots of knowledge, technology, capacity building for law enforcement. It's very difficult to do this. And if you have an expert using wallets, crypto wallets, and they start layering and doing these things, it's super difficult to get to these places, especially if they're using different techniques. And as you know, all these problems nowadays, they are of a purely transnational nature. I mean, these things can be done from remote places. And well, you ask me how do I see this? If some investors, they see it as a problem, if this is being regulated. Well, I think that we are a little bit far for having stringent regulations where everything can be controlled. Governments are really grappling with this, and I'm saying this objectively just as facts, without taking any position if this is good or not.
All right, Esteban Gudici, Senior Policy Advisor. It was nice talking to you on the show as regards this. We'll hope to connect with you some other time, even as we look at other areas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lekan. Have a nice day.